it was a team effort. Anytime the score is this lopsided, it's obviously going to be a great number of factors. But like when the Chiefs looked to Patrick Mahomes to be the guy that would lift them, he did the opposite. He sunk them.
Third and 16. Mahomes rolling out. Looking, firing, intercepted! Picked off by Cooper DeJean. Gets a block. DeJean is in. Wow. Touchdown!
Loses track of DeJean as he kind of falls back and reads Patrick's eyes. You could see the break. And this young stud, Cooper DeJean, another rookie making a huge impact.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. And for the first time in 727 days, we have a new NFL champion. As the Philadelphia Eagles squash the Chiefs' bid for a three-peat, they thump Kansas City 40-22 to win their second Super Bowl in franchise history. It's Kansas City's first loss by more than 2 possessions since October of 2021. Truly pretty unprecedented stuff in this Patrick Mahomes era. The Eagles flying high, having avenged their Super Bowl loss from 2 years ago. And look, there's plenty of room for heroes when you finish a season 17-3, and especially when you wrap up the competitive part of a Super Bowl really in the third quarter. Nick Sirianni got the Gatorade bath with 3 minutes still to go in the game, which I don't know if it's a record. It certainly feels like the earliest I've ever seen the Super Bowl winning head coach get the Gatorade dumped on him. Plenty of room for heroes. Saquon Barkley made NFL history on Sunday night, becoming the first 2,500-yard back in league history, passes Terrell Davis's number for regular season and playoff yardage. Vic Fangio and his defense hassled Patrick Mahomes into arguably the worst day of his NFL career. And then there's Jalen Hurts, who, despite plenty of criticism, came through in another effort on the biggest stage in the game, 17 of 22, 221 yards, rushed for a Super Bowl record, 72 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith both took turns feasting on single coverage. The Eagles finished with 345 yards of offense in a game where they really stopped moving the ball, trying to move the ball at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And at the center of it all was Hurts, who pulled all the strings in a performance that won him Super Bowl MVP. Not to mention Tom Brady's final LFG player of the game for this year.
Someone we're quite familiar with at this point, Jalen Hurts. Great performance by you. How did you manage to have your best game possibly in your career in one of the biggest moments of your career?
Well, I give all glory to God, first and foremost. He's greater than all the highs and the lows. And I just think, man, all the hard work, all the effort, all the determination over the years, and then carrying that over to this team, carrying it over to Philadelphia, and being able to build something very special over my tenure here and coach's tenure here as well. And so it all goes back to the work, and it's a team effort. I was telling Mr. Lurie, defense wins championships. And that defense played their ass off today, and it showed.
It's amazing, and you did it all game long right from the beginning. Did you ever imagine that you could dominate the Chiefs the way that you guys did today?
Well, I think it was a matter of taking it a play at a time. The whole thing was focusing, blocking out the noise and ignoring the wind and staying true to what the main thing was. And so earlier in the year, we set out to do this, and this was the ultimate mission. And it looks like we did it. I'm still processing it.
I
know. We work so hard for something, and it comes, and just really want to soak it in.
It's going to take a while to process it. You're going to wake up tomorrow morning, and you're going to feel so good. What I want you to feel good about is don't let that jersey out of your sight. I had a few stolen over the years.
I ain't letting that
So
happen.
keep track of that. It's going to be memorable down the road. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations to you and your team. You guys played so well all season long, and there couldn't be a better Super Bowl champion than the Philadelphia Eagles, and you led them to victory. Congrats, my friend.
Much love, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate you.
Every game that I broadcast, I award the LFG Player of the Game to that one player who makes me say, let's go.
You won't see many better examples of complimentary football, especially in a game this big. Jalen Hurts, Eagles offense coming to life with a lot of help from a Philadelphia defense that came to play, to put it mildly. 5 different Eagles pass rushers charted a pressure rate of 20% or more against Kansas City. 4 guys finished with 4 or more pressures. 2 guys finish with 2+ sacks. That would be Josh Sweat. 2.5 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, had a pressure that led to one of Mahomes' 2 interceptions. Then there was Milton Williams with 2 sacks, one of those being a strip sack. You heard it from Tom and Kevin at the beginning of the show. Cooper DeJean, on his birthday, no less, managed to go unnoticed by Patrick Mahomes, as you heard in the call earlier in the show from Tom and Kevin. Unnoticed by Patrick Mahomes, steps in front of a ill-advised throw, 38-yard pick 6. Zach Bond benefiting from the pressure provided by his defense to get the second interception, which really felt like it put this game away with plenty of time still to go in the first half. The Eagles pressured Mahomes on 50% of his dropbacks, despite not truly blitzing one time in the game. All of that pressure with just 4 pass rushers. Just a harmonious, a beautiful performance from Vic Fangio's defense. Maybe the crowning performance of Vic Fangio's storied career, which, if you know anything about the guy and the decades that he's spent in the NFL, says quite a lot. We'll even throw in the special teams game. No misses in this Eagles performance. Jake Elliott, who was a liability at times this season, maybe not a guy Eagles fans trusted completely. 4 of 4 field goals, 4 of 4 extra points, a perfect 8 of 8 kicking on the day. No bad days on this Eagles team at exactly the right time. We're going to get into all of this and more. We got 2 embedded reporters joining us later on in the show to talk about the performance in this game specifically. But before we do that, I think it feels important to think of what the Eagles just did in a fuller context, because it sounds crazy to say this is an Eagles team that at one point looked like it was capable of the run that we've seen from the Kansas City Chiefs. They were good enough to be the 1 seed in the NFC in 2022. They lose that Super Bowl to Kansas City by a field goal at the end of the game. They come back the next year. They respond with a 10-1 start. The famous Super Bowl hangover need not apply to that team until it does way later than usual. They lose 6 of the next 7. They crash out of the playoffs. It was a collapse bad enough to put pressure on Nick Sirianni, convinced a lot of people before this season even began to write this team off as a true contender because the vibes in Philly seemed that bad. What went unnoticed by way too many people was that Philadelphia responded to that collapse by completely remaking themselves. Big piece of the failures of 2023 was bad decisions in coaches by Nick Sirianni. He replaced 2 fantastic coordinators with 2 hires that were in over their heads, dressed that decision fantastically in 2024. He brings on 2 of the most qualified coaches that were available last year. Fangio at defensive coordinator, Kellen Moore at offensive coordinator. Needless to say, those 2 hires paid dividends all season long and in the biggest game of the year. They turned to free agency. They turned to the draft. They got aggressive, as general manager Howie Roseman loves to do. And the story of this Eagles season is that virtually every single one of those decisions cashed in. Fangio and Moore speak for themselves. Saquon Barkley, the marquee free agent addition from the rival New York Giants, literally set records in his first season. The first and second round draft picks, Quinyon Mitchell and DeJean, were difference makers basically from the word go. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, key piece of that first Super Bowl team, goes to Detroit for a year, comes back, gets 6 interceptions for this feisty Eagles defense. Mekhi Becton, washed out of New York as a highly touted left tackle, plugs in at guard as a training camp whim, something Nick Sirianni and Jeff Stoutland noticed during the course of OTAs, actually, I believe it was. Plug him in at guard where he is a star. Maybe the most surprising example of this at all, Bond, who signs on from the New Orleans Saints as a special teams afterthought, gets moved to inside linebacker by Fangio, becomes an All-Pro and a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and helps the Eagles lock up a championship in the stadium where he used to be a special teams guy. You add that many game changers to a team that was already good enough to win 11 games last year and lose a Super Bowl the year before. Maybe this shouldn't have been a surprise. Clearly it was, because so many people, yours truly included, picked the Kansas City Chiefs to win this game. But maybe it shouldn't have been. An all-time heater of aggressive decisions, gambles that paid off in a big, big way. Wasn't without its setbacks, wasn't without its drama. There's always bound to be at least a little bit of drama in Philadelphia. But the Eagles have been one of the best teams, one of the most impressive rosters in football for the last 3 years at minimum. And now they have another shiny trophy to add to their case to prove it. All right, let's take it down from the booth to the field with another guy who was on hand in New Orleans. Our own Greg Auman of FoxSports.com. Our friend was there all week covering the Eagles side of this matchup. And oh, what a performance to get to recap, Greg. I've got a couple things for you, but you just filed your stories for FoxSports.com. You had a chance to watch this live in person in the Superdome. Before I get to my thing, what was your biggest takeaway from the action?
Just so impressed with Vic Fangio and what he did to come up with a game plan to keep Patrick Mahomes in check. Didn't really blitz at all. Had 4 up front and won with that, and consistently got to him. Mahomes, I think, went 0 for 8 on third downs to start out. He had 6 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 return for a touchdown. It's just a dominating first half. And, by the time Kansas City scores 22, but the game's really over in the mid-third quarter there before they really got going at all.
I'm glad you used the word dominating, because that's what I wanted to talk about is, I'm sitting here thinking about our previews for the game and the way we talked about this game, and hindsight's 2020, but I start to think that, the legacy of the Chiefs and of the repeat and everything they've accomplished, it kind of feels like it diminished how dominant the Eagles were themselves. I mean, this is the team that had the second best point differential in the NFL. They won 10 games in a row at one point this year. And I did the math. After this win, they finished with a plus 68 point differential in the playoffs. So against the best of the best, they kicked ass and took names. And I'm not sure we really talked about them enough in that tone of voice prior to kickoff.
I agree. I think it's one of those where the people that I picked the Eagles to win and nervously picked them to win by 3, I think. And I don't think there were that many people that had them winning by even a touchdown, let alone being up 40-6 or whatever this was in the fourth quarter. And again, you think about what they did in the postseason against really good NFC teams. And again, Kansas City was so consistent in barely winning, but they really weren't a dominant team. They had a dominating record. You're 15-1. You have to be a great team, but I think they were always just good enough to win. So you didn't have that sense in many individual games of this being a dominating team. They were a team that won consistently, but rarely won as convincingly as the Eagles did down the stretch here.
The other thing I think is worth pointing out is it didn't always look like it was going to be this way for the Eagles. This season started shaky. You saw it down in Tampa right before their bye week. They got annihilated by the Buccaneers. So I want to throw to some sound from Saquon Barkley here, acknowledging that this season really felt like it turned on a dime when they got to their early bye week in week 5.
we got it. We got the team to do this. When do you think that moment was for you where you felt like, you know what, we can take this thing all the way?
I think the change happened on the bye week. You know, we're 2-2, 2-2 in Philly. Feel like the sky's falling.
Yeah.
But we had a conversation within ourselves that we have all the talent. We don't want to look back and be like what it could have been. So we all locked in from that moment. Won 10 straight, had a loss, battled back from that, and, you know, got in the playoffs and made a run and got here.
He mentions there that it felt like the sky was falling at 2-2. There are a couple weeks where it felt like the sky was falling after they won games. It's pretty impressive, and I think it's a testament to just how talented and dominant they were, that they were able to weather all of the noise that goes with playing in Philly and not just win a championship, but do it in about as impressive a fashion as you could ask for.
Yeah, Nick Sirianni talked about that in postgame in terms of the adversity this team had to overcome. And he talked about even overcoming adversity in wins, in having wins, and you had to kind of answer for how you won or why you won. But to see what they became, I mean, this wasn't even necessarily the textbook recipe for winning with the Eagles in 24. I mean, Saquon Barkley, they're up 24-0, and Saquon Barkley, I don't think had a run longer than 9 yards. At one point, I think he had 9 carries for 18 yards. So you take what had been their bread and butter, what they really had leaned on offensively, and the Chiefs essentially took that away. And then you saw Hurts start to throw the ball downfield. You saw Hurts take the game over with his legs, broke his own Super Bowl record for rushing yards. And obviously, I think what helped the offense is that the defense gave them about a quarter and a half to really click. And then from then, they had every reason to play comfortably because they were up 24-0 and never really let them close to that.
That's what we've been saying about the Eagles all year, and I'm kind of kicking myself here. I don't regret picking the Chiefs, but this game, it played out in the way that the Eagles want it to so well, because the Chiefs masterfully, like you said, they masterfully dealt with Saquon Barkley, but that creates so many favorable advantages for Jalen Hurts in the passing game, whether it's receivers getting one-on-one looks, which they did, which they won, or you play a lot of man coverage trying to crowd the box and deal with Saquon. It creates room for Jalen Hurts to run if the pass rush doesn't get home. That's exactly what happened, and it is just a picture-perfect example of how tough it is to build a game plan for these guys. Oh, and by the way, the Chiefs had 1 first down in the first half. I mean, please, let's not bury this incredibly impressive defensive performance.
Yeah, I mean, to look at Patrick Mahomes, I think Patrick Mahomes' worst postseason game in yards per attempt. You won like 8 yards an attempt. The worst he'd ever had was 5.5. Okay, and in the first half, he had 2.4 yards per attempt. I mean, that's a bad rushing day, let alone your passing attack from the best quarterback in the NFL when it comes to postseason of late. So to take what they have won with, especially in January and February, and reduce it to 38 yards and a half, where Travis Kelce doesn't have a catch and there's so little downfield presence. That first down they got came on their first play, and then none the rest of the way. 0 for 8 on third downs. Turnovers, at all the wrong times. We really haven't seen the Chiefs unravel like that. And it's entirely because the Eagles defense knew what to do and got after them and never really let up until whatever it was, the fourth quarter, and the game's out of hand.
You're going to celebrate a championship no matter what, but a performance like this against the back-to-back champs and a team that already beat you in a Super Bowl, I think it's going to lead to a prolonged celebration from the Eagles. And, with Nick Sirianni catching up with Tom Rinaldi after the game, it's exactly what he mentioned. I want to throw to that next.
Nick, you talked about the special brand of togetherness that this group had. You preached it all season long. How did that shape what happened tonight?
These guys did not want to let each other down. And yesterday in the meeting, they talked about not wanting this to be over. That's special. And they said the only way it's not over is if we have a parade and a ring ceremony later. So I guess it's not this 2024 Eagle team's not done yet. We got a couple more things to celebrate. I love these guys. Again, it just keeps coming back to, you cannot be great without the greatness of others. This is the best team sport there is.
Aside from the box score, I think that's the other long-lasting narrative from this game, is that it feels like I don't want to say legacy builder. It feels like a legacy cementer because for everything Nick Sirianni has accomplished, which is a lot, by the way, in Philadelphia, he's one of the most scrutinized head coaches in the NFL. Jalen Hurts, despite being an all-pro, despite nearly winning this game 2 years ago, a very heavily criticized quarterback, a guy that spends a lot of time under the microscope. He is now a Super Bowl MVP, and Nick Sirianni becomes the second coach to deliver a championship to Philadelphia. It would be easy to make the argument that these guys should have been above criticism before, but I think this is the definitive settler in that department.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you go back 2 years ago, Jalen Hurts had such a great game in Arizona, almost beat this Chiefs team, really made one mistake, and just had Patrick Mahomes on the other side. You know, there's so many young quarterbacks in this generation of quarterbacks right now who haven't been able to get out of Patrick Mahomes' shadow. You think about Josh Allen, you think about Joe Burrow. It would have been Jalen Hurts until tonight. And tonight he comes up and makes the plays that Patrick Mahomes did not. I mean, had an early mistake, threw a bad pick early and worked his way through it. Won this game with his arms and his legs. I mean, this is huge for him in that it's really easy to just be a great quarterback at a time when there's a legendary quarterback who already has 3 rings. They didn't fear Kansas City. They came in with confidence. They believed in their game plan, and they're champions now. That speaks to Nick Sirianni as well. Like you said, a wobbly way to get there at times, took his share of criticism. You're ultimately judged by how you finish your year. And this is an Eagles team that played its best football in January, and especially tonight, and they're champions as a result.
I saw Sirianni was joking in the post-game coverage that he understands that the booze will come out quickly if it's not up to snuff, even as quickly as next season. That's just life in Philadelphia. But hey, Doug Peterson got a statue outside of Lincoln Financial Field, even if he was only the head coach for a few more years. So no matter what happens from here, Nick Sirianni is officially a Philadelphia legend. I would say, Greg, at the risk of sounding like a hater, I would have voted for Josh Sweat to win Super Bowl MVP. I thought the Eagles' defensive front was the biggest catalyst to winning this game. They pressured the hell out of Mahomes, like you said, without needing to blitz. Sweat had 2.5 sacks. He had the pressure that led to the second interception by Zach Bond, which, for my money, is the moment that really put the Chiefs behind the 8 ball. It's not to say Jalen wasn't great. Jalen was fantastic. I thought he played a wonderful game, but I would like to have seen the effect of the Eagles pass rush get recognized with that award.
Absolutely. Early on, it seemed like I was looking, I mean, there hasn't been a defensive Super Bowl MVP since Von Miller 9 years ago, which is not to say there hasn't been great defense played in Super Bowls. It can be a quarterback award sometimes. So I think what hurt the Eagles a little bit is that they split things up. Again, Sweat made a good case for Sweat, made a good case for Milton Williams. Cooper DeJean made a case. Zach Bond made a case. I think you kind of split the votes on defense, and then you have a quarterback who gets things done in a way the other guy didn't. And then when you have 3 touchdowns and you run for more yards than anybody ever has as a quarterback in a Super Bowl, you start making a compelling case for yourself as well. So I think there was a chance there where it looked like a defensive MVP, but I think he also understands how important this was for Jalen Hurts and what it means for him to get this and to take his team to victory tonight.
4 defenders having a case for Super Bowl MVP in addition to that performance from Jalen Hurts, I really think just underscores this team. I think that is a picture-perfect snapshot of why they are world champions now. I'm going to let you get out of here, but first, I don't even have a good segue for this, but we got one more bit of sound, and as the media star for the Eagles leading up to this game, I would be remiss if we didn't throw to one more good Jordan Mailata soundbite after winning Super Bowl 59.
How would you describe how motivated this group was when you're coming off what happened 2 years ago against the same team?
I mean, it's hard because it's a completely new team. I think that's the beauty about it, the culture that we built early on. We didn't, we left that baggage in 22 because, didn't want to bring that to the new season. I mean, just a crazy, crazy journey so far. I mean, I don't even know what the hell I'm saying, I'll be honest. I already forgot the question because I already counted that as one question. You got 2 more left.
I I just wanted to put that out there because when I heard him say it, I was actually thinking, where are you going with this, Jordan? So the fact that he recognized that he had no idea where he was going, I think we can give him some grace in the moment of trying to process that. And I do appreciate not only the best team in the NFL this year, but a team full of fantastic personality, as we saw during the build-up to this game.
Oh, sure. The accent wins you over right away. Team talking about it was hard. And then he's on the podium midweek, and they were asking him what he's done in New Orleans. He said, I took a couple of walkabouts around town. He's so unique among NFL tackles. This is not necessarily a very international sport. So when you have someone like him, who's so colorful, who's so outside the box, and has found such success under Jeff Stoutland as part of this amazing offensive line, he's really a character. He's easy to root for. And now you see him celebrating a championship tonight. So no, it's been a neat week for Jordan, and look forward to more of the same from this team.
First Australian to win a Super Bowl, according to our stats people, which honestly really surprised me. Like the fact that there hasn't even been a backup or a kicker somewhere along the line to win one. Also, if I had known you did such a good Australian accent, I would have had you do it way before now. Yeah.
I'm going to stop right now. I think I got it. If you thought it was good, I'm happy leaving right now where it is.
We will leave it there, but no, I'm going to call on that as we move forward into the offseason. But Greg, thanks for all your hard work this week and this season, man. It's been a blast. I'll chat with you soon.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Let's take it over to the other side of this matchup and the other side of the field down at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans, because we had two writers on hand for the Super Bowl, obviously. And of course, I've got to check in with my guy, Henry McKenna of FoxSports.com, who was handling the Chiefs side of this thing all week. Henry, you know, if the Chiefs had played a better game and still lost, I don't think anybody would be surprised. But I will call it shocking, and not shocking that they lost, shocking that the Kansas City Chiefs, who we talked about it in our preview episode, they are the kings of the high leverage moment. They are the kings of delivering in the clutch. They failed all of those tests, all of the marks of a team that delivers in high pressure situations. They were just gone. I mean, talk about a hell of a time to play your absolute worst game in quite some time.
Yeah, maybe it should have been a harbinger when I was speaking to a Chiefs coach during media week, and he was saying that he'd been asked the question multiple times, does it ever get old? And he said that it does. And I was like, that's interesting. It kind of seemed like, you know, this Chiefs team was maybe not complacent, but not as motivated as they should have been. They got into a 10-0 hole, which is kind of ho-hum for Patrick Mahomes. But the Chiefs know that it's ho-hum. The Eagles know that it's ho-hum for Patrick Mahomes to come back from a 10-0 deficit in the Super Bowl. It's happened every time he's in the Super Bowl. And so the Eagles were built to control the lead. They're built to make sure Mahomes can't get back into the game, or any other great quarterback that they faced this season, including, you know, with context now, makes Jaden Daniels, his season even more impressive, his postseason more impressive, even with the loss to the Eagles. So given how the Eagles were built, a complacent, or at the very least patient Chiefs team was not going to win this football game. And you know, it takes hindsight to say that, but now we know, right? And maybe Patrick Mahomes sensed that as we kind of wound down the second quarter, which was when he got itchy. And he talked a little bit about that post game. He was talking about how he takes the blame for those situations, that he's looking to try and bring a spark to the offense, but sometimes, you know, that results in the type of plays that actually hurt the team. And so he said, you know, that those two interceptions that he had were the reason why he feels like he's going to blame himself more than really any loss he's had in his entire career. So maybe one of the most immature games from Patrick Mahomes that I've ever seen, in terms of impatience, in terms of turnovers, in terms of forcing the football. So like you said, you know, the guy that we think of as, and who I've touted, all season long as like the money player on money downs, the money player in the fourth quarter, the best situational football on the planet. He looked like a rookie in the most crucial moments of this game. And ultimately, it was a team effort. Anytime the score is this lopsided, it's obviously going to be a great number of factors. But like when the Chiefs looked to Patrick Mahomes to be the guy that would lift them, he did the opposite. He sunk them.
I love it when you can read my mind, because right here on my rundown, the first sound we want to throw to, and you outlined it perfectly, but let's go ahead and hear from Patrick Mahomes, who talked about how his decision-making put the Chiefs in a situation they could not recover from.
We didn't start how we wanted to. Obviously, the turnovers hurt. And, I take all the blame for that. Just those early turnovers swing the momentum of the game, and then they capitalized on them, and they scored. They scored on the one, and then they got a touchdown immediately after. So that's 14 points that I kind of gave them, and it's hard to come back from that in the Super Bowl. And so just didn't play to my standard, and I have to be better next time.
I love the word you used, man, itchy, because it's perfect, because that's exactly how Patrick Mahomes looked. And I'm curious for your perspective. First play of this game, Greg Auman mentioned it. It looked like classic Chiefs, and it was honestly an incredible play where Mahomes' whole body language goes to the swing pass in the flat, and he fires a no-look laser for a first down, and it was the last easy thing that happened for the Chiefs in the entire first half of that game. And I wonder, there were so many tight windows. There was so much pressure in his face. I wonder if Patrick Mahomes realized in the early going of this game that it wasn't going to happen without him doing something superhuman. And in trying to do something superhuman, he makes two costly mistakes that are the biggest reason why the Chiefs lose this game.
No, you're 100% right. That's the way I saw it as well. A rare moment where we can just completely agree, Dave.
It took all year, but we got here.
Yeah, right. Finally on the same page. No, but you're right. Like I was talking about, if the Eagles' plan, is to build a lead and protect it with Saquon Barkley, then the Chiefs' plan has to be to keep the Eagles from getting that lead, which they are so good at protecting. Like, it's obvious football, get the lead, but it's not so obvious in that, like, the Eagles are actually built to just like protect it better than anyone. Saquon's going to run for 5 yards a carry somehow, and that's going to chew clock, and then all of a sudden you're going to realize you don't ever have enough possessions to come back into the game. That's exactly what happened. And Mahomes could feel, I'm guessing he could feel that momentum shifting away from him. He saw, that 10-0 lead or that the Eagles got. That was when things started to catapult. Mahomes must have said to himself, hey, this is my moment. I'm going to take over this football game. And like we said, he ended up sinking them. And then it happened again, the next drive, like the next interception. So Mahomes could sense the game slipping. He knew that what they could not let happen was happening. So he pushed the intensity. He pushed the risk management. He made decisions that were probably not advisable, but he wanted to take an extra risk because he knew that even if he like punted in that case, right? Even if it had been a punt instead of an interception, that the Eagles were starting to run away with this one, and ultimately, like, the turnovers or the touchdowns had to start happening. Sort of like when guys throw on fourth down or late in the game on third down, they arm punt it, right? Like, there's that situation where it looks like a really dumb interception, but when in reality, the game is so far out of hand, you need an explosive play to flip the feeling, flip the momentum. Then you're kind of like, oh, okay, maybe that interception wasn't quite so bad as I thought situationally, right? I think that what Mahomes saw was situationally, the moment called for a big play. It called for a touchdown drive. And so he couldn't walk off the field, whether it was with a punt or an interception. Ultimately, that actually was what forced the interception.
It's crazy that the Chiefs got to this game considering a lot of things. I mean, it's a testament to how good they are that they got to this game. But against this team, they finally looked like a group that had next to no juice on offense. I mean, Xavier Worthy had a nice rookie season. He did some very impressive stat padding in the second half of this game, 8 for 157 and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, a lot of that happening after it was decided. I know Rashee Rice, you presume he comes back from injury next year. You can look forward to things like that, but this looked like a team that needed more juice at running back, at receiver. Travis Kelce did not speak about his future after this game, but even if he doesn't retire, you'd probably like to get younger at tight end. It's remarkable that it took them until the Super Bowl to get to that point, but plenty for Kansas City to want to work on in the offseason, and that's without even mentioning their offensive line as well.
Right. Definitely going to head into a rebuild, I think, for the Chiefs. Not like a tear down, but maybe a retooling. And like you said, I think what we've seen over the last year from Travis Kelce is just like that he's not a tight end one right now, and probably not ever again. I was talking to Dave Tobe, the assistant head coach, and he made this indication. He said, I believe, like, when you've always been the guy, sometimes it's hard when you're not the guy anymore. That's paraphrasing, but he was talking about Travis Kelce. He was talking about how Kelce's evolved in terms of leadership throughout the year, really coaching his teammates, some receivers, some tight ends, teaching them how to run routes in the way that Pat Mahomes really likes. But in talking about it and complimenting Kelce, he sort of also delivered the backhanded compliment, which is that Kelce isn't the guy anymore in this offense, that they've got to spread the ball out. So I think the question is, do you want the guy to be Rashee Rice? And I think he probably can be that guy so long as he's healthy. And given the scale and scope of his knee injury, it's possible that will take some time. He won't, if he's playing in week one, he's probably not going to be at his best in week one. Xavier Worthy, we saw him play great. Is that enough? A developing Xavier Worthy and a getting healthy Rashee Rice and then a fading Travis Kelce. Is that enough for this offense? I wouldn't be surprised if, like you're saying, Brett Veach says no, and we need to think about specifically the tight end position and the future there, but also maybe thinking about other options at the receiver position. And then, like, the offensive line was the biggest problem tonight, in my opinion. The left tackle position has been a turnstile. With every single player they've used there, they drafted a guy in the second round this year. It didn't work out. They brought in Wanye Morris. It didn't work out. They brought in DJ Humphries. It didn't work out. So they moved their left guard, Joe Thuney, out to the tackle spot. Sometimes that's a brilliant move because it galvanizes the line. Sometimes it's the opposite because it weakens the left guard spot where Thuney is a Pro Bowler. And then it also weakens the left tackle spot where Thuney is not a Pro Bowler. So by moving your Pro Bowler away from the spot where you can really solidify left guard, you actually weaken two positions rather than having the left tackle be the only weak position. We saw a little bit of that tonight. I think Thuney actually, it isn't to say that the Thuney experiment was a disaster, right? It did work in previous weeks and it helped their offensive line. But this was the game where it didn't, where that game plan didn't work out as well as they would have liked. And they can't do that next year. They need a real left tackle. That is, maybe aside from quarterback, probably the hardest position to fill among any. So whether they think that they're going to go after another one in the draft and sort of call last year's tackle Kingsley Suamataia bust, I would be surprised. But they do need to bring in someone and someone very legitimate in order to, after watching this, right? Like, you think about the Tampa Super Bowl and what they had to do to fix the position. I think they might have to get as aggressive.
It's surreal to be in a spot where we are contemplating all these moves the Chiefs have to make instead of just, hey, roll the ball back out. You're the Kansas City Chiefs. You'll be back on the mountaintop. And I'm with you. I'm very, very confident the Chiefs will be right back in the mix with the contenders next year, but there is work to do here in a variety of places, as evidenced by what we saw in this game. And on top of that, this is what I want to get to next. This has been an exhausting run for Kansas City. You talk about playing multiple playoff games, going on a deep run into the Super Bowl in 3 straight years. And on top of that, you don't win this one. It is exhausting. It is deflating. And I wanted to hit on Andy Reid mentioning all of the extra football that the Chiefs have played to get to this point before they start trying to reclimb the mountaintop next year.
to our fans and all the support that they've given us. Today was a rough day. We didn't really play well in any of the phases. Didn't coach good enough. They did a nice job. I'm proud of our guys, though, for the battle, the fight that they put in throughout the year and all the games that they've played here over the last few years. So my hat goes off to the guys for that. And we'll learn from this. Like most games here, when you don't do very well, you learn from it as a coach, you learn from it as a player, and you move on.
I don't think anybody's shedding a lot of tears for the Chiefs having to play 12 or 13 extra games over the course of the last 3 years. But like I said, it's physically and mentally draining. You saw the pain that Chris Jones was dealing with in this game. You saw a lot of very depressing shots of the Kansas City sideline. So that on top of needing to retool a few things, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, I'm curious to see where they go from here. It'll be an interesting offseason. But before we get you out of here, Henry, we spent too much time on it in the preview episode not to hit on it because you wrote about it. We threw it out there as a what if, as sort of a thought exercise that maybe this game could launch an Eagles dynasty. And before I get your take on it, our last bit of sound here, it's not Chiefs sound. It's coming from Darius Slay, who took the words right out of your mouth. So let's hear it.
Yeah. The only thing better than one Super Bowl is two Super Bowls. Do you keep the hunger to come back and do it again next year?
Of course. That's the mindset, man. We know we got a great thing going, man. And what's so crazy, we got a great young core. Yep. So now, these guys can honestly build their own dynasty. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to play too much longer with these boys, but I know from just looking in, man, you got a lot of young guys. Jalen Carter, Quinyon, Cooper, and, got J-Lix. You got guys that's real young, and this team is just ready to go. And, I feel like this is going to be a new dynasty for them guys.
Usually it's us in the media that jump to conclusions like before the confetti's even gotten swept off the field. So I really love hearing it from Darius Slay, and he makes a hell of a point, man. You said the same thing. This is a team with a young quarterback. All the pieces are still there on offense. You're not losing too much in the way of veterans. I mean, this is probably the end for Brandon Graham. We'll see how much longer Darius Slay wants to play, but the vast majority of the reasons why the Eagles are in this game don't look like they're going anywhere.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately look at the core that's going to be here next year. Look at what Howie Roseman did last offseason. I don't think he's going to need to be as aggressive this offseason because of how well this team is constructed. But man, I don't know how much you and Greg talked about Jalen Hurts, but I just want to give him his flowers. We talked about if he wins this game, he is undeniably elite, isn't he? I mean, we talk about his winning percentage throughout his career. He sits, right there with Peyton Manning and Joe Montana. And given his statistics, it seems surreal to make a comparison to those guys. But guess how many Super Bowls Peyton Manning had? And guess how many Jalen Hurts has? Look, I think I'm not trying to say that Peyton Manning and Jalen Hurts are comparable at this phase of his career, but we were talking about whether Mahomes could eclipse Brady not too long ago, and I think that took a real hit. I just want Jalen Hurts to get his moment. I think there's a beautiful space in the NFL right now for unusual styles of quarterbacking, and Jalen Hurts doesn't play it in the prototypical way that we think of. He's an extremely efficient passer, however, and I think sometimes that is harder for quarterbacks than throwing 50 times a game. Sometimes throwing 25 is actually like an enormously challenging thing to do for a quarterback. They want to be involved constantly. They want to be in rhythm constantly. And offensive coordinators have to manage that. With Jalen Hurts, you don't have to. We saw him hit the big plays when they needed him most in this game and in previous games. But like A.J. Brown said in the postgame, he was like, our defense was basically so good. Our offense didn't have to do very much. And so I just love where Jalen Hurts' game is at right now. That isn't to say that I wasn't appalled at it over the first 4 weeks, but they were changing systems, so I guess I can give him that asterisk. Ultimately, I think we have to take him extremely seriously 2025, I think we view him as a top 5 quarterback. There's really no way around it. When he can manage games and manage situations and hit throws that are such high difficulty, but with very few checkdowns in between, the guy deserves props.
I told Greg, and I won't shy away from it. I told Greg I probably would have voted for Josh Sweat to win MVP of this game. But before anybody thinks I'm too much of a jerk, Jalen Hurts played his best 2 games of the year in the NFC Championship and in Super Bowl 59 against the team that is usually always the clutch team. Outplaying Patrick Mahomes on this stage, it's incredibly impressive. And he's only 26 years old. I think people get stuck in the mindset that by whatever year Jalen Hurts is in, is this year 4 or year 5? People get stuck in the mindset that you're a finished product because you've been a starter in the league for a little while. Jalen Hurts will be a vastly different player at 30 than he is right now, and so on and so forth. There's room for growth. There's room for adding new tools to his bag. If this is where he is at 26, Lord knows where he could be. And by the way, he's already a Super Bowl winning quarterback. On top of that, he plays for the Philadelphia Eagles, who are always going to be hell-bent on aggressively putting a good team around him. And so whatever you might think of Jalen Hurts, this feels like the floor. Not to say that they're going to win the Super Bowl every single year. I'm not trying to say that, but I think the Eagles are going to put themselves in a position to contend every year, and Jalen Hurts officially deserves to have the reputation of delivering when they do get to those big moments. That's a hell of a combination no matter where you put him in the league pecking order.
Yeah. And I think people will probably bristle at the idea that Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback, but I think it's more reflective of how I value quarterback skills. And I talked about it on the pod before this game that went up on Saturday. Like, I just value wins more than most people do. And I think, like, today, actually, like, if you watch where Patrick Mahomes made mistakes that cost his team ultimately the sort of crux of momentum that really broke their back, whereas Jalen Hurts just sort of like worked methodically and didn't make any game-breaking errors. It's the kind of quarterbacking that I don't think gets enough respect. But like when I watch Jalen Hurts in comparison to someone like Jordan Love, I'll take Jalen Hurts every time for the next 6 years. Because like you said, I think Jalen Hurts can only work up from here, and he's already not making the mistakes that cost his team's games. Jordan Love, you got to figure out how to cut out all the interceptions that are killing his team's chances every other game, right? Where he goes cataclysmic. And that's kind of the side of Mahomes that we saw tonight that we were so unaccustomed to seeing. We didn't see it from Jalen Hurts.
The other thing worth pointing out, and we can do this to hit, I think we will have hit on every pertinent storyline. Hurts might be doing it again next year with an all-new offensive coordinator. I haven't heard anything official, but the expectation is that Kellen Moore will be staying there in New Orleans to take the Saints head coaching job. I guess that could change. We'll see what happens. But Jalen Hurts has done all of this without the stability in the coaching staff and in the scheme that great quarterbacks typically benefit from. So if he needed another feather in his cap, go ahead and throw that in there as well.
Yeah, I think he's had a new offensive coordinator in all but 1 year of his career, if I'm correct there. But ultimately, the other thing I'll say about him too is, like, we're talking about him ascending, and I'm getting pretty excited about where he ranks in the NFL quarterback spot. Look, I think that there's a possibility that he can regress. And, think about Dak Prescott, who's a guy like we thought early in his career was going to sort of ascend into eliteness. When he started losing the tools that he had on offense, the support that he had on offense, and even on defense, right, in part because of his contract, we started to see him lose that edge that we saw earlier on, and he plateaued and maybe even declined, right? So I think that's the challenge that Jalen Hurts will face. We will ultimately see him lose A.J. Brown at some point, right? A.J. Brown's going to move on. He's going to retire or whatever. And he won't have one of the best receiving tandems in the NFL anymore unless Howie Roseman can do something remarkable, which he can. But I think at some point we're going to see that the weapons and the tools come down a little bit. And that will be the moment where we need to see Jalen Hurts grow. But until then, he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL because until then, he still has A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and who else? Saquon Barkley.
This is where I'll make sure to give Howie his flowers and say, as long as he's calling the shots in Philly, I mean, there are going to be hits and misses, right? And Howie has plenty of misses, even though he deserves a ton of credit for this season. As long as he's there, he's going to do everything he can to make sure they're not trying to do more with less. That hasn't been the Eagles' ethos at any point in the last 8 years, and I think that's going to continue. But I do agree with you in the grand scheme of things. I think, like I said, a 26-year-old quarterback, plenty of room to grow and mature. And this is a fitting way to wrap this up because we obviously started out talking about the Chiefs, what went wrong for them. But on a night this dominant by Philadelphia, it's hard not to gravitate back to this performance on both sides of the ball. So I think that's a great spot to put a pin in it. Just an all-around impressive performance from Philly. Henry, it's been awesome chatting with you all week, man. I appreciate it so much. Go have a celebratory drink for me, and I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you having me, man.
And just like that, we are done. I don't know where the time went. I cannot believe we have gone through a full season, but this is the end of our Super Bowl recap show. The Philadelphia Eagles reigned supreme at the end of a 2024 season. Had so many twists and turns. It feels like a lifetime ago, but also a blink of an eye that we were doing preseason predictions. And here we are in early February with a new Super Bowl champion. I can't say thank you enough to those of y'all who followed along, listened, engaged with our content. This was a really fun year for us. We deeply appreciate it. So thank you. And don't worry, stay subscribed. There's no off season in football, obviously. We will be back Thursday. We've got an early look at the top teams for next year. Of course, what else would we do but jump way too quickly into prognosticating 2025? That's obviously what's up next. So stay with us. We got one more show on Thursday before we take a little bit of a hiatus. We'll take a little bit of time to catch our breath. But like I said, the NFL is a 12-month-a-year sport. We got the draft to get into. We got free agency. There's drama everywhere. There's going to be quarterbacks moving. You get it. You know how this goes. There's no days off in the NFL. So early predictions on Thursday, short break, and so much more content coming your way. But for now, that does it for the season. That does it for the Super Bowl. This was a lot of fun, y'all. I really appreciate it. I'll chat with you soon.